It was supposed to be just another ordinary lunch. Ibrahim Traoré, the 35-year-old president of Burkina Faso, had been traveling incognito, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace away from the endless headlines and demands of leadership. But what happened at that quiet restaurant would make headlines across the world. It wasn't just the waitress's actions, it was the shocking truth behind her assumption. As President Traoré sat at a corner booth, quietly enjoying his meal, the waitress approached, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. He was dressed simply, with no sign of his presidential status. He had done this many times before, trying to escape the pressure of being the man in charge of an entire nation. What happened next was not only humiliating but also terrifying in its implications. Without any warning, she came over to his table, a glass of water in hand. Then, without hesitation, she poured the water all over him, her face twisted in disdain. "How dare you sit here like that, looking like you don't belong," she spat. The room froze. Everyone watched in silence as President Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of a country that had been through so much, sat there, drenched in water. People held their breath, wondering how he would react. But what happened next would not only shock the waitress but everyone else in the room. You see, Ibrahim Traoré was more than just a man. He was the president of Burkina Faso, a nation that had faced political instability, conflict, and social unrest. He was a symbol of strength, resilience, and a hope for a brighter future. But on that day, in that restaurant, he was nothing more than a man trying to get a meal, just like anyone else. He wasn't wearing his usual presidential attire, no entourage, no security detail. He was just Ibrahim Traoré, a man who had endured battles both physical and political. But this encounter was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. When the waitress saw the man she had just humiliated, she didn't see a president, she saw someone who, in her eyes, was beneath her. The water splashed onto his suit, drenching him. But it wasn't just about the water. It was about the disgust, the racism that fueled her actions. She saw him as just another person who didn't deserve her respect. But what she didn't know was that her actions were about to come crashing down on her. She didn't know that the person she just humiliated was one of the most powerful figures in Africa today. Ibrahim Traoré, who had been thrust into leadership amid a country's dire need for change, sat quietly, his eyes betraying no emotion. The restaurant went dead silent. Everyone's eyes were now on the young man who had been drenched in water, waiting for his reaction. Would he stand up, shout, demand an apology? Or would he, like so many powerful leaders before him, retaliate with strength? No one knew what was coming next. Just as the waitress turned to walk away, thinking her job was done, she caught the eye of the restaurant manager. She saw his shocked face and the way he rushed towards her. "Do you know who that is?" he asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. She turned, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The man you just poured water on," the manager began, his voice trembling slightly, "is President Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso." Her face drained of color. In that split second, everything changed. The small, quiet moment of her life was turned into a massive spectacle. The guilt hit her instantly, but it wasn't just the embarrassment. It was the reality that she had just poured water on the one person who had the power to change not just her life but the fate of an entire country. As she turned back toward the president's table, her legs wobbled. She had no idea how to make things right. She had no words that could undo what had just been done. The waitress approached slowly, her steps hesitant. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, waiting for the fallout. But as she reached the table, what she found surprised her. President Ibrahim Traoré was sitting there calmly, wiping his face with a napkin. His expression was unreadable. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was simply silent. As the waitress stood before him, struggling to speak, she stammered, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize who you were." Traoré looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, the entire room felt still, as if time itself had stopped. The air was thick with tension. Everyone was waiting for him to speak, to do something, anything. But he didn't. Instead, he simply smiled. "Do you think you'd have treated me any differently if you had known?" he asked, his voice calm, but his words carried a weight that seemed to linger in the air. The waitress, already mortified by her actions, struggled for words. She had no excuse for her behavior. I don't know what came over me," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it." For a moment, Traore just looked at her, and then, with a surprising softness, he said, "I understand. But that kind of disrespect can't happen again, not to anyone, no matter who they are. We're all human." The waitress, now in a full-on panic, kneeled down before him. Please forgive me. I didn't know, I'm so sorry." Traore nodded. Mistakes happen. What matters is what we learn from them. What happened next was something no one in that restaurant would forget. The waitress learned a harsh lesson in humility that day, but President Traore showed the world the power of grace. He taught a lesson far more powerful than any political speech or public statement could: showing respect for others, regardless of status or position, can change lives. Now, ask yourself, how would you have reacted in his place? Would you have acted with grace, or would you have let anger cloud your judgment? What can we all learn from this moment? If you believe in the power of kindness, of forgiveness, and of making things right, share this video. Let's spread this message far and wide, because it's time we all learn to treat one another with respect.